So today I would like to teach you how to play Backfire. So the first thing I want to do is go over the card types and their layout and what information is given on each. So this is the title box, which is the name of the card. This is the text box, and that explains exactly what the card does. And then in the bottom left we have the card type. And we see there are blasts, spheres, and rolls in this game. All of our blast cards are going to be red, all of our spheres are going to be gray, and all of our rolls are going to be blue. Now the fundamentals of the game is when you play a sphere, you can play it into either your zone or someone else's zone. How you're trying to win is if this is in someone else's zone, you can attach a blast to it, and what detonate does is it says at the end of the player's turn, if the sphere is in their zone, they lose the game. So now this player would need to get rid of it on their turn, and they would do that using a roll card. In this case it's roll left. It would go to the next player on the left, but we're going to be just doing a two-player example. It would go to this player. Now they have to figure out how to get rid of it. One last thing before learning by playing. We have the red around the text box on Venom, and this indicates that its effect is trying to make you lose the game if it's in your zone. The yellow around the text box means it's trying to make everyone else lose the game if it's in your zone. And as you can see, there's a black border around Venom's text box, and with Venus there is a light teal around. And what that signifies is that this triggers at the beginning of the turn. On your turn you have 4 phases. There's the start phase, which specifically is there for those spheres that trigger at the beginning of your turn. You then move on to your draw phase, which is drawing 2 cards. And then on your play phase, you can play any number of cards, but it's typically a good idea to save some for defense, especially the rolls. Now, each player begins the game with 3 cards. And they share a draw pile, and they also share a discard pile. We are going to state that this zone, this playmat, represents one player, and that is player 1, and this will be player 2. So if we want to look at player 1's hand, we have Venus, which says at the beginning of your turn, if there are 5 or more spheres in your zone, each other player loses the game. So we know that what we want to do strategically with this one is to have it in our zone with another 4 spheres to try to force this player to lose the game. Copia states, when this sphere enters play in a player's zone, that player draws 3 cards and discards 1 card. It's really good to draw cards in this game. Those are how you get yourself out of trouble. And finally we have trade, which is choose a sphere in your zone and a sphere in another player's zone and exchange them. We'll go through 4 turns each to teach how to play. So at their start phase, player 1 has nothing that triggers, has an empty zone, so they will go to draw phase, which is to draw 2. Now, they just drew Venom, which says at the end of your turn, you lose the game unless you discard 3 cards. And Detonate, which all of the blasts in the base set are exactly the same, and they just attach to a sphere, and state that if the player ends their turn with that sphere in the zone, they lose the game. So, the play phase, to see more options, we're going to play Copia, and I'll do it like this. To draw 3 and discard 1. Now, we got 2 more detonates and a new card here, Boomerang, what this does, it says, roll a sphere in your zone into the discard pile, then back into your zone. We're also going to play Venom into player 2's zone, because this one will force them to either lose the game or discard 3 cards at the end of their turn. And I feel like that's a good place to pass. We have 6 cards in hand. If you ever have 7 or more at the end of your turn, you discard down to 7. More than 7, I should say. So now we are going to player 2's turn. They have nothing that triggers at start. So they draw 2, and they want to get rid of Venom because they don't want to discard 3 or lose the game. So they're going to roll left, which will move Venom from here 1 player to the left. Now, as for the cards that player 2 has, we have Chaos, which says the first card you play on your turn must be played at random. If the selected card can't be played, discard it. So this restricts your opponent's plays a little and might make them do something stupid right off the bat. So we're going to go ahead and put that in their zone. We also have Topaz that says, at the beginning of your turn, discard 1 card from your hand. This is burning our opponents out of resources potentially, so we will also put that in their zone. Fracture says, when this sphere is rolled into the discard pile, the player who rolled it may choose any sphere in play and roll it into the discard pile. And then we have Roll Choice, which is roll a sphere in your zone to any other player. They're going to go to end phase. They have nothing that triggers, and so it goes back to player 1's turn. So now we do have something that triggers at start phase. We will discard to Topaz, and we can now draw 2. And I just realized I made a mistake. I was supposed to discard to Copia when I played it last turn. So we're going to play a card, and it has to be played at random because of Chaos. So we are going to put this Detonate on our own sphere, which is a little not smart, but we wanted to get rid of that one anyway. It's just going to make us keep discarding. So we're going to roll choice and choose player 2. And we will play Venus into player 2's zone because we want to trade Venom away. And even though Chaos is inconvenient, it's not really a threat. And we're sitting in a nice situation here because if both of these are rolled back without anything happening to Venus, that would be 5 total spheres, and player 1 is looking to make a play for the game already. So now we go to player 2. We'll discard to Topaz. Then draw phase happens. And we are already in a situation where we are probably screwed here. So we can roll both of these away. And throw a Detonate. But Venus is going to trigger and win this game. So as I go over different obscure interactions within Backfire, I just want to clarify that it's really not a complicated game. So if you are thinking about trying it out and it seems a bit overwhelming, a lot of the things that I'm going to go over probably will not occur, except maybe 1 in every 10 to 20 games. The thing is there's just a lot of variance, which is great for replay value, but it does mean that there are some things that you really have to think about how they interact with each other, and I'm going to try to clear up as many of those as I can. Ember says, when this sphere rolls to a player, that player discards a card. If the discarded card is a blast card, put it on top of the draw pile. So, if you play this into your zone, it does not trigger because it entered play in your zone instead of rolling into your zone. So putting this into another player's zone will not cause them to discard. However, when you roll it to them with pretty much any roll card that isn't trash or boomerang, it will roll to them and, of course, trigger that effect. On that note, I want to mention the interaction of a blasted copia and boomerang. Boomerang says that you roll a sphere in your zone into the discard pile, then back into your zone. Now, any cards that are attached, when they roll into the discard pile, that's when they separate. So, in this case, you would roll Copia and Detonate together into the discard pile, roll Copia back, draw your 3 cards, discard one of them, and then that is completely applied, goes to the discard. And the reason that you're getting this effect is because it went to the discard pile, which is considered not in play, so this both entered play and rolled to you. Another interaction I want to cover is when multiple triggers are going to the same player. So, Rain says when this sphere rolls to a player, that player draws a card. Ember says that when it rolls to a player, that player discards a card and then puts it on the top of the deck, on top of the draw pile if it was a blast card. So the question, if you were to roll them both at the same time, with Push, for example, which says if you have 2 or more spheres in your zone, roll 2 of them to the player to your left. So when this happens, the question is, does this player draw first, or do they discard first? When these are both going to their zone and triggering, they choose how they want to approach this. So typically, it will be better for player 1 here to choose to draw the cards so they have more options on what to discard. Unless, of course, they have no hand, in which case they will discard a card that they don't have and satisfy this effect, and then they will just get a free card out of it. Now, when Rain and Ember are parted, so let's say this is a 3-player game, and I am parting Rain and Ember, which is basically a roll right and a roll left in the same card. I now, as the active player, have forced 2 of my opponents to be a reactive player and to choose triggers. So the order that this happens will be the player to my left, because that is turn order. We play clockwise. This trigger will happen first. It'll go around the table. All right, now, it is probably not likely that something this complicated will happen, but in the event that it does, I would like to clear up how it works. So, Ember and Rain, we've talked about. Cyclone says whenever this sphere is rolled into the discard pile, you choose left or right and roll each sphere in each player's zone, 1 player in that direction. So we have Sift that says when this sphere rolls to a player, that player looks at the top 2 cards of the draw pile, puts one into their hand, and the other into their discard pile. And Heat states when this sphere rolls to a player, that player reveals the top 4 cards of the draw pile, puts all blast cards back on top of it, and puts the rest into the discard pile. So, if player 2 trashes Cyclone and chooses left, he moves all the spheres in his zone 1 player to the left, and then player 1 moves all the spheres in his or her zone 1 player to the left. Now, each of these 4 spheres trigger when they are rolled. So all of these now have an effect that have to be applied. And each of them can potentially interact with the top card of the draw pile. So it's important to know how it all shakes out. Now, the active player is the player whose turn it is. Anytime a player is forced to apply text When it's not their turn, they are the reactive player. So how the triggers are applied, we'll begin with the active player, and then we'll go in turn order around the table. Now let's say you have multiple spheres that are trying to save you from losing the game. Right? We have Angel that says, if you would lose the game, roll this sphere into the discard pile instead, and you can't lose the game this turn. So this will effectively trash itself to save you for one turn. And we have Faith that says, if you would lose the game, reveal the top 3 cards of the draw pile. If none are blast cards, you can't lose the game this turn. Then put one of the revealed cards into your hand and the others into the discard pile. So since these are both blasted, both of them are going to trigger a you lose the game. Now, when this happens, at the end of your turn, it's all sort of a simultaneous. So what you're choosing as the active player is which you would prefer to save you first, or attempt to. So some cards allow you to apply their text during your play phase optionally. For example, Gamble says, once during your play phase, you may reveal the top 2 cards of the draw pile. If either are a blast card, you lose the game. Otherwise, put both cards into your hand. So, as a last-ditch effort to get more resources, you can risk losing the game to essentially draw 2 cards. Now, if you use this and it doesn't cause you to lose the game, you cannot then, for instance, boomerang it to roll it to the discard, then roll it back, and then use it again. It's still the same sphere, and it's still just once during your play phase, even if you roll it to somebody else and steal it back, or whatever. Now, when you have multiple spheres in your zone that each trigger at your start phase, you get to choose the order in which they are applied. So, Azure states at the beginning of your turn, draw a card, and Kali says, at the beginning of your turn, if you have 7 or more cards in hand, each other player loses the game unless they discard 3 cards. So, let's say you have 6 cards in hand. That's not enough to trigger Kali, because it needs 7 in your hand in order to make each other player lose the game unless they discard 3. So if you had both of these, the strategic thing to do would be to apply as your first, so you would get that card, and then when you apply this text, it meets the condition, and now everyone else loses the game unless they discard 3 cards. Now, let's say you have a blasted Gamble and an Angel, and you don't have any cards left to get rid of the Gamble. So you opt to look at the top 2 to see if there's not a blast, and in this case there is. So you would lose the game by applying this text, except Angel says if you would lose the game, roll this sphere into the discard pile instead, and you can't lose the game this turn. So this would trash itself effectively, and because you didn't lose the game, we have this otherwise put both cards into your hand, you would still get to draw these 2 cards. If we look at the same interaction with Faith, which says, if you would lose the game, reveal the top 3 cards of the draw pile. If none are blast cards, you can't lose the game this turn. Put one of the revealed cards into your hand and the rest into the discard pile. So what would happen is you would reveal these 2, you'd see that there's a blast, so this is making you lose the game, which makes Faith try to save you by looking at the top 3 cards. And since you didn't draw these yet, this detonate is still in those top 2 cards, meaning Faith cannot save you. Another thing I would like to mention is when you're placed into an option of doing something or losing the game with spheres that may or may not save you. So let's say that player 2 has Kali, and at their start phase, since they have the 7 cards, this makes player 1 lose the game unless they discard 3 cards. Well, let's say player 1 wants to keep these 3 cards and is trusting Faith to save them. They will go 3 cards deep. There is a blast, so this doesn't save them. This player 1, can no longer opt to discard the 3 cards to stay in the game, because Faith only happens, this text is only applied when you are about to lose the game. So thank you for watching. That's what I'm going to go over today. If there's something that I missed, please feel free to either comment below, send me an email, whatever.